What's up everybody, it's Izzo. Welcome to the lab and welcome to Devlog 4. For today, we're continuing with fixing the lag that's caused by saving and loading. We went over and fixed a lot in part 1, so if you haven't checked it out, go tune in. Before ending Devlog 3, we started the foundation for list and object processing, so that's where we'll resume today. Before getting into it, let me explain what's going on. What we're looking at right now is the same group of logic we were ending at in Devlog 3, but this time I added in the events that control the activation and deactivation of our endless loop here. That loop is going to be used for the object processing, which is what we're going to get started on today. So now that we're all caught up, let's get to it. So what we're doing next is we're going to actually start paying attention to the items. Just like how we had over here, we're going to be actually putting this part into practice now. So this part actually is going to have 3 different cases. We're going to need one for writing to a file, we're going to need one for taking it out of the list if the keyword is destroy, and we're going to need one for actually deleting the file. So coming back up here, what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to add in a new string for that as well, and we're just going to call it entry destroy code or entry file code keyword, just to keep things, not keyword, just to keep things kind of constant. Okay, and now all we're gonna do is we're literally just gonna take this. I'm gonna copy and paste it. Here we go. Is this what I'm looking for? Sorry, I got lost for a second. Okay, I'm gonna come over here and we're gonna start a new group called object processing, and we're gonna process the tree. Okay, so now for processing, what we're gonna do is we're gonna have to take one of these, and then we're gonna have to take the first thing that we're actually gonna want to do is we're gonna want to compare this entry file keyword. And we're checking to see if this is actually destroy. The reason why we're checking to see if it's destroy is because then there's no reason to process it. We actually have to take it out, and this would be the first thing that we need to do. The last thing that we would want to do is actually save it. So for the first thing, what we need to do is we're going to need to use a different object to check to see if there's a file in existence. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to say if name is a file, and I don't actually have the name. I don't have the file name of that right now, and the reason why I don't is because there's actually a few more things that we need to do here. So for the tree, since it's the tree, we're going to also have to be checking its object type. The reason why is because each one of these entities actually go into different folders just to keep things a little bit more organized, but unfortunately it does mean that there's more typing and coding on my side. See, if we come down here, this is the old logic for deleting files, and you have all of this, and then back here you have the tree gen, and then plus the tree. So of course all trees go in that one, and then for rocks, for example, it goes in rocks. It goes in rock gen. So I will have to take the keyword, and I'll have to figure that out as well. So now what we're gonna do is test the file. When we test the file, I'm literally just gonna take this and put it here and see if it's a file. If its name is a file, then we're going to destroy it or delete it. Simple as that. And that's the end of our first case. For the second case, it's pretty similar, but instead of checking to see if the file's already here, we're checking to see if it's deleted. So pretty much the way that it'd go if a file is saved is first we're gonna have this. First it would delete the file, and then after it deletes the file, it would hand off execution to this line right here, which is like, okay, the file is no longer there, so we can go ahead and do what we need to do to the list. And then that's when we're going to come back to the list, and what we're going to do is we're going to actually be deleting a line. And the line that we're going to be deleting is the current line. It needs a numeric expression. Hold on, let's see if we can figure this out. Current line number, there we go. We're going to delete the current line number, and then also what we're going to do is we're going to be subtracting from all of those values. We're going to be subtracting from update loop index counter, the update object counter, and the files left to update counter. The reason why is because once we delete this line, that means that there's one less object than what was actually grabbed in the beginning of our loop, which is all of the line numbers. So this would actually be one of the rare times that we do want to go in and actually modify those loop numbers. So now moving on to the last case, which is what happens if the entity file keyword is right. And then that's when we'll be grabbing the object ID and checking to see if it's a match. Now, if it's a match, this is where we're going to be setting on update file, and then we're also going to be subtracting 1 from the update object counter. And finally, we're going to move the list down 1. Not change the line scrolling. This one. And then just gonna go current line plus 1. And that would be the end of how we basically start saving and destroying the objects once the keywords and everything are in. So just like before, I'm gonna go in and I'm gonna do this for all the rest of the objects and all the rest of the files, and I will see you guys back here for when it's time to add in the next part. Alright, real quick before I actually go through and actually start editing everything, there's one more case that we need to add into a different part of the system. We're looking at the updating in objects files, basically when we update the files before, like while saving is taking place. So over here where it saves everything, what we're gonna want to do right before the update file of the object is turned off, we're gonna want to subtract 1 from the files left to update value of the list. That way pretty much now when we go through, when the list is processed, it'll have every time one object, their flag is toggled on, the update file flag is toggled on, it'll subtract 1 from its object counter, from its update object counter. And then when it comes through and it actually updates inside this system, when it's updating its files, it'll come through and it'll actually subtract 1 from files left to update. Those two values added together is what the system is going to use in order to tell if it's ready to be closed down or if the saving is ready to be stopped. Okay, so now the entire game can be saved. Every list and group of objects can now be processed, saved, and deleted. But I did have some bugs and some problems. One of the problems that I actually had was when I was reviewing the content to just the content I recorded earlier, my computer crashed. That was annoying. I had to actually come back in and redo this whole part. The second thing that happened is there was actually a problem with the item IDs. The first version that I had of the logic, this one was actually set to the ID of the object instead of the ID inside the list. The reason why that was a problem is because if the file is already set to destroy, that means that this object is no longer in existence. So it's looking for an ID that can't be found, like there's no ID that it's looking for. So I had to go back through and make that change as well. The last problem that I had was actually with one of the group of items. They're called consoles. And so basically I haven't explained this aspect of gameplay much, but there's 2 types of objects that can be used for farming and modification of items in the game. One being consoles and the other being game objects like plantable trees and campfires to cook food. Some of these objects actually need to have their values modified regardless of what segment it's located on, and they also need to have their values managed very, very frequently, such as campfires because they have fuel sources and cooking times, and then also the trees because of the fact they have growing times. I wanted it to be even if you leave that segment, you can come back, and if the correct amount of time has passed, you still get a full-grown tree. So basically, let me go ahead and show you guys the problem. I already fixed it in the game, in our current, the file that we're working on currently, but right here you can actually see it. So basically, for every global console that happens, there's a few different cases that happen for its file updating. One of them is basically the normal update if it's on the same segment and if the file needs to be updated. and then another one for this. And what basically the reason why all of this is here is because they needed to be subtracted from an update active count. So the reason why I actually brought this up is because not just to go over the problems that I had, but also to give a little bit of a teaser to what comes next, because this logic right here is actually where I derived the entire way that we reworked how to make the saving and loading logic work. Basically, every time that you were to end the game or go off on a segment, what actually happens is the logic actually starts by not just saving all of the values, but also making sure and ensuring that all of the items are saved before all of the consoles are saved before the game ends, and you can see that right here. And that's where I got the idea from. But instead of just doing it one by one like over here, what I did is I had the list be responsible. So this is actually the next part of the logic that we're going to be working on, which is basically just turning this into an actual point where we can basically make sure all the lists get updated instead of the specific game objects, how their flags are toggled for update file being on. What we're going to do is we're going to actually be toggling the list files going back up here to the logic that we just added in. We want to turn on the update files flag for the list, not the update file for the actual game object, because when this is turned on, that's what's actually going to make all of the update files for the game objects go. So before we actually get started with reworking that logic that I just showed you guys earlier, I wanted to show you this test condition right here. So this test condition actually just allows me to test to make sure that all of the objects are processed correctly within the list, either deleted or they're saved to a file after being processed. So the first one, all it does is it activates the update files flag on the list, and then this one down here, what it does is it's checking to make sure that the update started flag is active. Remember, it gets started right over here after all of the values are set according to the number of elements inside the list. And then it checks to make sure that this update object counter is 0. What that number actually is signifying is that there's no more items in the list to process. This files left to update value is also important because this is actually subtracted from for every item that is updated. Like when the file updated flag, the file save flag on the object itself is toggled, this files left to update is subtracted when that file is saved. So what we're going to do is we're actually just going to derive our ending condition for this entire list process off of this test case right here. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the update started flag, we're going to make sure it's on, make sure that this update object counter is at 0, and then we're going to come down and we're going to test for another value. We're going to test that files left to update, that needs to be 0 as well. And then for the last case, we're going to check to make sure that files updated is off. And if it is, then all we're going to do is we're going to turn it on. And then that's basically how the ending check is going to go. And once that check happens, that's what's going to signal to the system like, okay, all of the files for all the objects have been saved. It's safe to close the window, or it's safe to move on to the next segment. So now we can go back down to our ending events over here and we can start changing these out. So what we're going to do is we're going to change all of these update files of the objects, we're going to change those to lists. Okay, so now with all of those files finally toggled on, all the flags finally toggled on, what we're going to do is we're just going to delete all of these. These used to be used to check to make sure that all of these files got updated properly regardless of the segment that they were on, but now we no longer need them because that count is actually kept within the list itself. And then for this case right here, we're going to also pretty much just be taking all of this and then bringing it down here. These are two separate cases. One of them is for what happens if you exit the game from the pause screen, and the other one is for exiting with the end button. The end button is really just used for like just in case any errors or anything happens like that. I can just go ahead and end the game without any trouble. So now with both of those added in there, the last thing to do is to come down here, and we're going to replace this total update active count. That's what all of those values added up to at the end. This is where that is set at. See, all of the console values that you had is the total update active count. So now instead of checking for that, that's where we're going to be checking for the update finished. So we have to check all of these again, and what we're looking for this time is a flag on, and we're going to be checking if files updated flag is on, and we're going to check those for every single file. Okay, so now all of the files have now, all of the lists, all of their flags have now been checked to make sure that they're on. So that's pretty much what we got going for this part. Now all that's left is to test to make sure that everything happens properly. So I'll see you guys back here in a second. Alright, so here we are in the test game. We're just about to test out to make sure the features that we just put in worked. So I'm going to actually close this right here so that way we can see the whole HUD. I'm just going to do my regular thing, just do some looting. And then also what we're testing too is we're testing to make sure that there is no more lag when certain objects are destroyed, and also when we run off the screen still. I did see a little bit of lag, but I'm not sure if that's because of the game or because I haven't restarted my computer in a while. It's been a few days. Let's just keep going. It doesn't really seem like there's much lag going on. No, it's actually moving really smoothly, even with the computer being on, OBS going and everything. So good. It's looking good. High hopes here. All that we need to test now is to make sure that saving and loading works. I just get addicted to chopping down trees. Sorry about that. Alright, let's try to see if this works. Fingers crossed, everyone. It should. Once I press this end button, what should happen is everything should be saved, and then after that, the application should close. Okay, it's processing. We did it. It worked. We did it, guys. All right. Okay, with the first portion of saving added in, now we're going to look at loading in the objects. This is actually very important if we wanted to test to make sure that all the objects load in correctly. What we need to actually do is go back through and modify the loading logic for all the objects. So the way that loading works is it works in two parts. The first part is the list is processed much in the same way that it's processed when you're saving, and it just goes through every item in the list, and then it actually breaks it apart. And the first thing it looks for is its object type, and it's tokenized up here. So based on its object type, it's going to look at it, and then it's going to spawn in the specific object. From there, it's going to take the entire ID that's contained within this list, and then it's going to plug it into the tree, or into the object in question, which is the tree in this case. And then after it does that, then actually a separate piece of the system is actually used to load in the object. So then it's going to grab the necessary file for it, and then it's going to load in all the position values and any other values that are concerned with that object in question. So the problem here is that once this list is loaded in, it gets loaded in from a file. The list actually does not get loaded in with the IDs in question. What needs to happen is that we need to actually go through, and we need to actually append all of the new value. We need to append the right codes onto the objects again after everything is processed. So that's what we're going to be working on right now. So all we're going to actually have to do is just come in and put in one new action, and the new action that we're going to do is we're going to be changing this line right here. So right here, what we're going to do, instead of saying this, what we're going to put in instead is we're going to change the index of the line. We're going to get the current line, and then after we get the current line, we're going to actually be taking the entire line and then just appending the right code onto it. And that's the only modification we have to make. We just have to make that to all the game objects going forward. You know how we regularly have to do here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and apply this fix to everything, and then I'll see you guys back here. Alright guys, so there's actually a little bit of a problem. So right now, all of the lists they save and then they're loaded back in, and that's what we were just looking at. We were looking at how to make sure that the list, its integrity, like the right codes are actually kept in order even when they're loaded back in, because ideally at the end of the game they're supposed to save without the keywords appended to them. I actually went back and checked the files just to make sure, because I don't know, something in my head just told me it was wrong, and sure enough, the codes are still there. So what's going to happen when these get brought in is this entire line is going to go into an object, and we don't want that, because what that's going to do is it's going to change the entire file. It's going to basically corrupt the file system. So what it took me a second to figure out what to do, and what I decided to do is to basically just do the same thing we did to the loading, but do it to the processing the objects as well. So one time when the objects are being saved, the list is actually going to go through and it's going to be modified. And then another time, once the list is done, once the list is loaded back in, then it's going to go through and then all of the right keywords are going to be put back on. So what we're going to do here is, before anything, we're going to also do the set update. We're going to put the set update file on. But now we're also going to go and we're going to change a line, and it's going to be the same line, and we're going to get the current line number, and that's going to be the index. And then for this, what we're going to do is it's going to be the ID of the object in question. So we're just going to grab the ID here, and then that's going to be it. And then this way, by the time the list is actually saved, it's going to have just the clean IDs with no file keywords in them, so that way it'll be able to come back in and be loaded. So I'm going to go through, I'm going to add in all of these actions, and then I'm going to go back and I'm going to add in all the loading actions that you guys just seen earlier, and I will see you guys back here to test everything to make sure everything works correctly. Alright guys, we're back, and all the fixes that were needed have been applied. Couple things though, there were some problems with list processing just because of the way the lists were being modified, basically the logic of the code. I wish I was recording when I was doing the bugs, but honestly that did not get to me. I was getting frustrated at the fact that the lists just weren't working right. But what I finally ended up getting everything going and everything correct, so let me show you guys the changes before we start testing. So the first change is where the list is loaded in at, and then how that list is modified. So the list is loaded in like if you're loading in from a loaded game, and then right here is where we would actually start appending to the list, since they're coming in with just the IDs. When we're loading in the object, and specifically when all of the values are loaded, that's when we're going to actually be plugging in the right code for the list, so that way when we save the game again, everything saves correctly. And now down here in the updating files, that's actually where we go ahead and take off the right code before the lists are saved to a file themselves. That way, by the time the list is saved, we have a nice sanitized file to work with. So now that you guys are all caught up, now that all the changes have been applied, without further ado, it is time to test the changes to CodeName AllNight. So let's do it. Alright, so here we are in the game, and just like how I always like to do, I'm just going to go ahead and loot everything. And what we're testing for first and foremost is we're testing to make sure all the lag is gone when we start doing, like when we modify any objects in the list. And then second of all, what we're looking for is the lag being gone or mitigated when we start generating new chunks. And from the looks of it, we're looking good. Yep. Alright, here comes, okay, it's still a little bit laggy. That might be because of the list being on the screen though. But for the most part, we're actually good. I don't know what's wrong with him. That shouldn't be happening. And there's no way to get it right. Okay. But yeah, just gonna ignore that. And now we're just gonna try to end the game. Alright. Yep. Oh, looks like we ran into some problems. Ran down housing is the problem. Okay. Alright, I'll see you guys back here in a second. Alright guys, I'm back, and to tell you the truth, I couldn't figure out where the bug is. I didn't see anything wrong with any part of the ran down housing's logic in saving and loading, or just straight up entity management. This probably means that the problem is a little bit deeper than just a mistyping somewhere. To really diagnose the problem, I need to look at all the lists and their respective values. What I suspect is that somewhere I'm working with the wrong list on an object or a group of objects. In order to really look at all that, I need data from the game collected in an efficient way and laid out in a not so chaotic fashion. This means that I'm going to need a custom debugger. I say custom because ClickTeam Fusion does already provide a debugger for tracking objects and their values, but tracking multiple objects at like one point in time is where it gets slow. And also the other problem is that I can't export that data like to a file for me to look at later, which means I do have a little bit of homework. There's actually no custom debugger in CodeName AllNight at the moment. Like I said, this is my first serious game, and the need for a custom debugger just hadn't crossed my path yet. So yeah, now we're in this situation. But I'm actually gonna be ending the video here. I'm really sorry guys that I can't test and play like how I planned, but this is the reality of the lab. Sometimes things don't go according to plan. So what I have in mind is for devlog 5 to be about me designing and implementing a debugger into the game, and then devlog 6 is where we'll probably be looking and finding and addressing all of the errors that are present, and then after we fix them, we'll have a little playthrough at the end of devlog 6. For now, thanks everyone for joining me in the lab. It got crazy today, like there's a whole lot of errors and a whole lot of fixes. Nevertheless, I'm glad I got to work on it with you guys here. Leave a like if you enjoyed today's lab project, let me know what you think in the comments, and subscribe to join me in the lab for more experiments. Alright guys, have a good one, see you for the next one.